welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Udikang. It's the show where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and the challenges and triumphs within those fields. It's inspiring, informative, and very much inquisitive. My guest today helps companies better understand and improve their processes. He's a lean manufacturing expert and a certified Lean Six Sigma black belt and coach. He's also founder and principal at Kurm Consulting Inc, a company involved with process management and improvement. So please help me welcome to today's show, joining us all the way from North Carolina, Alexander Kurm. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Good to meet you. Good to have me on. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very much welcome. I've got a few questions for you, but I thought I would start out with one particular question about how you got into process management. So maybe you can explain to us how and why did you get into process management and the improvement consultancy space?
Yeah, for sure. So, basically, for people that know me and for those that don't, I've spent almost my entire career in the process improvement space, whether it's, Lean Six Sigma, business process management, and other continuous improvement philosophies. So I spent my entire career in that space, usually working for other companies. And so because of that, I've really enjoyed it. Clearly, I've enjoyed my time through there, and I've had a passion for doing all things kind of continuous improvement and process improvement. So I love the variety it brings, and I've always really wanted to do something on my own. So probably about, 4.5 years ago now, I finally kind of made the venture to go out on my own after working for many different companies and industries in those spaces for so long. I said, you know what, now's the time. Let's put my shingle. Let's see what happens, and that's what I decided to do 4.5 years ago now.
Fantastic. Now, why is business process management so important for organizations?
I guess I would say process management and problem solving, in my opinion, are super important for companies. And I do a bit of a delineation there. They're related clearly, but there's a delineation I wanted to make there. Is that first, if you're not driving a culture of problem solving in your business or in your company, then you're probably not competing hard enough, and at some point, inevitably you're going to be irrelevant. And problem solving, though, can be done with various philosophies, Lean Sigma or design for Sigma, design thinking. There's so many different things which kind of helps with problem solving, which is amazing. However, it's interesting though that process management is kind of that foundation. So you can't really be great at problem solving. And in order to do an effective amount of problem solving and sustainable problem solving, you need a stability in your business processes. And that is where kind of BPM comes in my mind, as being that discipline that is required to provide solid foundation from which you can do all these sorts of improvements. And if you're not doing that, and you're not managing your processes well, you've got no ownership and accountability, all the improvements you get are just going to be traveling in another year or two down the road at some point, right? So both, to be, in my opinion, to answer your question, they're both super important. And that's kind of how I see those delineations a little bit, but they're of course related, right?
Yeah, accountability, I think, is definitely key. And the thing about BPMN, I know, is that it's much more related with the cloud, much easier with the cloud, I guess, as opposed to the historic way that things were done. The business processing was done, which is not too bad. It works. It's pretty good. So what are some ways that companies can really start to adopt and implement continuous improvement approaches?
I guess it really starts with, and I guess you've heard this so many times, but obviously it starts with, your leadership, the senior leadership, right? And they have to want to make a change. They have to want to perhaps develop a culture of problem solving and process improvement and that sort of thing. And so from the outset, if you don't have that, it's kind of a dead deal from the get-go. And so I know people have talked in the past of, it's all about grassroots movements. It is, but it's very difficult to get a grassroots movement with no budget, right? With no money, there's going to be an investment of some kind in your people. So there's got to be somebody or a few people at a very senior level that really have a desire to change. So that has to happen first. I think after that, you certainly need education and training, because there's a lot of stuff that people just don't know. There's a skill set you have to train in people in terms of process improvement and process management. And so there's stuff you don't know that you got to train that into people. The interesting thing is nowadays training is taken on a different ballgame altogether, because in the past you do a lot of on-site training. You show up and you do that stuff as a consultant or whoever. But I think with COVID, it's presented some really interesting opportunities, because obviously everyone wants things virtually, and one of the things we're doing, which I think has been a huge success, is that I think people underestimate the benefits of virtual training from a scalability standpoint.
Mm.
So you can really put way more people through a virtual training approach. It can be geographically dispersed, and get huge kind of critical mass of people getting indoctrinated with this new language, whether it's BPM or Lean Six Sigma or whatever that is. And so we underestimated, I think, that in the past, because we just cast it aside and say, well, virtual training is never as good. And you're right, it may not be as good as on in person, but boy, the scale that you get with that
Yeah.
is far, far better
Oh
than you can
yeah.
get, with site stuff. So obviously the next, the ways that companies can start is get involved in some training. I highly recommend, leveraging virtual, not just because of COVID, but to scale up your deployment and your indoctrination, right?
Mm.
So those are some of the first things that you can do. And then of course, you and I both know, like, training is great, but you need, that's like that, it's just such a small percentage of someone's
Mm.
knowledge. You go and take a training, and you're inundated. So you need some kind of a support model, coaching model, something like
Mm.
that. And I'm a big sports guy too, so you, having a coach to help you, how do I apply these skills to these problems, and that, it's number one thing in terms of developing employees, is that, and often overlooked by companies. But you need some sort of in my opinion, coaching support model to help these people apply those skill sets. So anyway, so
Mm.
talked a lot, but those are the kind of the three areas you can start with that are big areas. But I think those are good places to start.
Yeah, coaching's definitely a huge, no doubt. Now, at BMO, also known as Bank of Montreal, you are head of Nimbus Business Process Management. I like that word, Nimbus. And
Yeah,
you're also senior advisor for the Process Center of Excellence. At BMO, you're responsible for supporting the bank's big data strategy for mapping the business process architecture for the bank. And you are also a lean coach. So can you give us an idea of your experience in that role?
yeah. I mean, I kind of wore many hats initially at BMO, at Bank Montreal, but I think, eventually, my role was predominantly in the space of, the head of Nimbus BPM, um, and the center of excellence for the bank. And so what that means is, and so really Nimbus is, if for those that don't know, it's actually a BPM application, right? So it's called TIPCO Nimbus, and it was an application that the bank had at the time, and it was a very, very powerful, application, similar to Elements. And actually, there's a backstory if you don't know, but there's a very strong link between Nimbus and Elements, which we'll share another time. But nonetheless, so my role was to head up that Nimbus deployment. But more importantly, it wasn't just overseeing an application. It was more around, okay, so how do we, the bank had a desire to articulate their overall process architecture and taxonomy for the whole bank. How do we articulate those processes that we do as a bank worldwide? So my goal was to help the bank figure out, what is that taxonomy? What does it look like
Mm.
from one business to another, one function to another? And quite a bit of work, but that was one of my roles. And in so doing so, that and coming up with that taxonomy, that makes a major input into the Nimbus tool to say, okay, well, here's our foundation, our process foundation that we can start building upon, right? So if we're going to be transforming and digitizing and automating stuff, I've got an articulation of what our business processes are. They're governed in an application like Nimbus. So that was really my role. And so building a center of excellence around that, around the tool and BPM and training, probably we trained up about 500 authors,
Ooh,
of Nimbus kind of worldwide. Yeah, it
wow.
was it was a very, very large deployment. One of the largest ones for Nimbus, but certainly, had its challenges, but I think, had some successes in many facets as well. But that
Mm.
was largely my role, I guess, back at the Bank of Montreal, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there.
Fantastic. I actually know, well, BMO is not one, it's one of the big five or big six banks in Canada. But here's something interesting, just a case in
Yep.
point. I found out that BMO is tightly linked with the military, and there's a lot of people who retire from the military who get hired by BMO because sometimes they have problems finding jobs in the private sector once they retire. So yeah, BMO. I had a friend who was working with BMO in the bank, and she retired straight out of the military, mid 40s, and BMO was there. So
Interesting.
that's something interesting. I didn't know.
I mean, no, and obviously it's an interesting little factoid. I didn't really notice that so much, but it
Mm.
makes. I mean, there's a lot of logic in there, because I think especially in the U.S. when you talk to U.S. customers, obviously there's a heavy military. A lot of folks are in the military in the U.S. and when they come out of the military, when you through the kind of process space of Lean, Six Sigma, all that type of stuff, a lot of them in the U.S. have a military background. Because military has been trained in those disciplines and that stuff in the past. Also, they follow a very regimented approach on how they do things, which is super helpful. So a lot of those folks that come out of the military are super valuable resources that maybe BMO had something, they knew something that others didn't, and said, hey, snap these guys up and
Yeah.
and bring them in, because it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Now, what are some of the major problems that you see with continuous improvement strategies within an organization? I mean, how can organizations sort of overcome some of these problems as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, kind of deployment. There's a whole myriad of problems that can come up. So what I thought when I sit back and think about things, I guess there's at least three or four main areas that I see quite typically that come up as issues for companies in terms of their deployment. And one of the most common ones I see is, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, this lack of alignment
Mm,
and support from the C-suite or those senior leadership, right? So again, if there's too many folks that aren't really bought in or aren't really in agreement that they want to make this change and dedicate the time and money required to drive that philosophy, then that's a significant impediment, and it happens a lot of places, and we see it quite a bit. Competing priorities.
mm,
Second one is, and I guess it's equally important, but manifests itself a bit differently, is that um, sometimes I see companies, they choose to run way too many strategic level
mm,
projects and initiatives, and or maybe even a bunch of kind of larger or mid-level projects, and they do not involve the frontline staff in their problem solving, or they do not involve their frontline staff and leverage them to solve issues on their own or with help, I guess. And so what happens is you end up in this world where you're running hundreds of projects at any one time, and you come to this kind of grinding halt because the businesses and the subject matter experts, they just can't dedicate any more time. There's no more time. You're missing a really big group of people that can solve problems for you as well. So I find people, when companies are putting way too many projects, way too many transformation projects, there's just too much going on. That also can stifle the CI type of deployment or the process improvement stuff. Um, the last one, I guess that I would say, well, I guess maybe, yeah, I'll just say it's the last one, and it comes up in highly regulated industries. So I don't know if you've got a lot of experience in regulated industries, but I guess my background, I have, whether it's banking or pharma or nuclear or whatever,
mm,
and I find that companies that want to deploy that in those highly regulated industries, they have a good idea that, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to let the employees, solve problems and do all that stuff. But in reality, what I find is they don't often devolve the decision making power to the people that are solving the problems. It's a very, very command and control model, where banking, pharma, where they basically have people that are at a very senior level that will not allow, you work on these projects, you want to change stuff, but then when it comes time to, I want to change this, oh, that's got to go 4 levels up before we get an approval. And so the rate of problem solving just comes to a grinding halt in that type of a world and culture. And I think it does two really bad things. One is you don't get your problem solving. The second thing is, you're not empowering the people to to solve the
mm.
problem. So people get really discouraged in that type of environment, if not already. So anyway, to me, I see them often. The last one is more in a regulated kind of industry, but I do see that command and control model being pretty challenging thing that does come up from time to time.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting you mentioned that. I can understand the issue of priorities, right?
Yeah,
And I worked for a software company. It was a small upstart software company years ago, and they had hired a lot of people who had worked with banks like TD, Financial, these other big Canadian banks. And the project managers were coming from these companies, and they said that they just loved it at the software company because they could actually get things done much more efficiently. They said, "You don't
yeah,
understand. The banks were just so regulated; it took us so long to get stuff
yeah,
done." So
yeah, yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about. But
for sure.
is it also an issue of maybe the C-suites not really understanding what that change is, so therefore they just don't want to implement it?
It could be that for sure. Yeah. I mean, sometimes the change can be so complex and people don't fully understand it. So they're reluctant to release control or release
Mm,
the authority. That's one. One is that um, often the regulators in those industries kind of reinforce that behavior in a way where there's they'll come in and they want to have 3 4 levels of authority to do stuff, but they're not actually, it's not mandatory you have to have that, but they do. There is instances where they kind of want that, so that reinforces that behavior. But the more often than not, it is actually an internal thing where the leaders typically do not want to devolve decision making power down to people, right? So things like, I've worked with certain banks, not just BMO, but at certain other banks where you've got decision making power that at the the branch level, the branch manager who's in charge of employees and lots of financials coming or money coming in and out of that bank, they're allowed to make decisions of no more than $100, right? So if the customer's got an issue, hey, you know what, I can only approve up to 100. After that, I got 2 level. This is the type of thing. It seems like a small thing, but if they're not empowered to make that type of decision, what kind of improvements do you think they're going to be able to make at that level too? So I think a lot of that is self-imposed. And yes, to your point, maybe they don't understand the magnitude of the change. But that's kind of been what I've noticed for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, your business uses Elements.Cloud, like you talked about Elements just briefly. And Elements has a number of sort of robust functionalities, like linking requirements to user stories and so on. How has Elements really helped your company to improve process mapping?
Yeah, so obviously I'm a consulting business, and so I go out and help other companies with their processes and with their transformation or their process improvement needs. And so I often will come armed with Elements and say, guys, like, I know you're using Visio or Lucid Chart or whatever else you're using. I'm like, but at the end of the day, guys, if you want to get better from a process perspective and be more process centric organization and drive that type of behavior and thinking, you need a more robust tool. And so Elements to me it's just a fantastic tool to have in my back pocket that I can come out and say, guys, look, here's how we've helped other businesses using Elements in terms of it. To me, one of the biggest benefits is the mapping notation and the language is super simple, and it is tremendously valuable. And I think to the point where people underestimate the value, because as process practitioners like you and I and other people, we're often wanting to see, hey, look, give me the crazy BPMN notation with the swim lanes and all those different things, right? And so we aren't putting ourselves as process practitioners in the shoes of the end user. And this is what I like about Elements is that it's designed, I think, in my opinion, from the end user perspective. If I want people to own their process, I want them to update it themselves, I want them to manage it themselves and improve it themselves, they have to be able to understand what like the language of that process is. What, if I have to get out a legend and a color scheme just to figure out what's going on, and it's super complicated, I am never going to, as a an end user, I'm never going to use it. I'm never going to become better from a process management perspective. I'm not going to use it. So to me, that is a huge benefit. It's a simple language. It looks super slick. It's super intuitive with paper clips and attachments, and so to me, it's the best thing about the tool for sure. But the fact that you've got additional features that can attach basically any information I want, like you said, a requirement, user story, data table, attachments, SOPs, other links, that thing. Now I can enrich the process content in a way that you probably can't in other applications. And so it gives you that flexibility to say all of my information that I need to improve my process is here in one place. On my map, I'm looking at it. I can link to a requirement. I can link to a procedure. I can do whatever. So those additional features that comes with Elements super valuable. That version control
Yeah, I was
and
going to say
and
version
and
control.
releases, like holy moly, especially in a regulatory and compliance world. I mean, it's kind of bare minimum. You need that no matter what. So to me, it's a simple, awesome user-faced tool, but you've got all these other features. It's far superior, in my opinion, than other mapping tools that are out there. So I've been using it like every time I'm at a client. So
Religiously. Yeah, I was going to say another cool feature. You can be able to see which field is attached to which process map. That's kind of cool too.
yes, yeah, exactly, for sure.
Mm.
And then yeah, and I mean all the integrations that come with it as well. And I think we talked, that I'm not so much a Salesforce guy, but clearly it's Salesforce is everywhere these days. So the
Yeah,
fact that it integrates well with Salesforce and Jira, like there's just so many additional
yeah,
benefits
no,
that
no
go
doubt.
beyond it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's kind of cool. Now, you were director at Maple Leaf Foods. I believe they're based out of Burlington, Ontario. You're working as a director at Maple Leaf Foods, where you were responsible for deploying Six Sigma. So maybe you can explain a bit about Six Sigma, its importance for business. I mean, how can one sort of gain Six Sigma training as well?
Sure, yeah, no, so you're right. And so at Maple Leaf, spent about 10 years there. And before I left, I was one of the directors of Six Sigma, overseeing their deployment of Six Sigma across their bakery divisions and all their manufacturing operations and bakery divisions. So, but really, I guess, Six Sigma is just, it's another philosophy to help drive problem solving and continuous improvement. And at Maple Leaf, we used it, that was the term we used, but it was basically, we would do theory of constraints, we would do lean, we would do
Mm,
BPM as well. It came under the umbrella of what we called Six Sigma, but
mm,
ultimately, Six Sigma really got famous from GE when they really
mm,
catapulted with, Jack Welch rolling it out. And at that time, like every Fortune 500 company, back in the I guess early 90s, was doing, pure Six Sigma.
mm,
And so that's how I got introduced to it.
mm,
But in essence, it made a lot of sense because at the time, Lean was also getting a lot of traction through Toyota and other companies, and so they kind of came to this collision, and
mm,
it made a lot of sense that they came together. So post late '90s, Lean and Six Sigma came together, and what it is today is Lean Six Sigma. So it
mm,
made a lot of sense. They weren't competing priorities or competing philosophies; they were complementary. So they came together. And so now when you go out and get training or whatever you want to do, it's all based on Lean Six Sigma.
mm,
Um, and certainly I offer that training as well, but you can get it basically anywhere. And so Lean Six Sigma training is all over the place. But what I would say is that, when companies or individuals want to go get educated on Lean Six Sigma philosophies, um, to be honest, like the best experience you're going to get isn't necessarily through the training itself. Certainly
mm,
there's bad training, but then there's good training. And then, even good training is still not going to be sufficient. And we talked about
mm,
coaching. In my mind, it's such a fundamental part of development of any person in any discipline, and as well as Lean Six Sigma. So if you go and get training, and that's what you want to do, highly recommend that you find a way to get coaching to
mm,
complement you. So that when you're working and applying those skills and tools, and there's a lot of skills and tools and statistics and everything in Lean Six Sigma, and you got to know how to apply it in certain situations, and as opposed to like forcibly applying every tool that you're given to
mm,
every problem where it's not necessary. So
mm,
yeah, so in my mind, you can get it really anywhere. Of course, it's something I offer, but I highly recommend you also get coaching.
mm.
So to me, that was the biggest part of my development in my career, and I'm a big advocate for that.
Nice. I was just curious, when you're doing training, do you do like half day, full day training, or do you go like I don't know, a couple of hours every day for a week or something like that? Is there a certain
Yeah, I mean, it's changed because of COVID for sure.
mm,
So the on-site stuff, there. I'll just speak more, I guess, about the virtual things now. So certainly there was on-site training that was existing at different types of training. So there would be pure entry-level training of Lean Six Sigma,
mm,
which we will call, they have an affiliation with kind of martial arts, right? So they
mm,
would call it a white belt or a yellow belt
mm,
training,
yeah.
which is entry-level stuff, right? And then you get into green belt level training, which is usually a week on site, versus kind of a 1 or 2 day intro
Mm,
session. And then you've got black belt training, which is usually, depending on the company that offers it or consultant offers it, it's about 5 weeks
mm.
throughout a year on site every
Oh
day.
well.
And then, of course, master black belt goes beyond that. But with a COVID world, I mean, from our company, we offer white belt, yellow belt, and green belt training all virtually. And so we would split up that 2 days or 5 days into usually 2 to 3 hour sessions max, spread out over as over a few weeks type of thing to
Mm,
try to, and we weave into it self-serve videos and other content, and we rely on the users to do some self-study, which is important,
mm,
so that we come together to talk about some of those more complicated subject matter and
mm,
concepts. Um, and of course, if you come into those courses, in addition to the time, you really need a problem to solve, right?
mm,
It's not just about taking the training. How do we give you a problem that you can apply it to, so you're delivering value to your business or to your organization at the
mm.
same time? So yeah,
Nice. I was going to say, when I first heard of Six Sigma and I saw these belts, I thought, wait, because I used to be into karate, martial arts. I thought,
yeah, yeah,
I don't get it. Well, what's the correlation? But that's how it is. Sometimes you get these overlaps, and it just weird names in a weird in a technology industry. But anyway, we're all used to it now.
yeah, yeah, of course.
Um, any takeaways or lessons learned for those? It could be a business analyst, it could be even a project manager who wants to enter the business process management field. Any takeaways? Any lessons learned?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I've noticed over the years is, various different people that are in that space, or consultants that come in, or even people in full full-time jobs in businesses that are in that space. But I guess my only advice is when I think about it is just try to be open-minded to various philosophies, to either solving problems or improving, business processes. And so when people come in with a specific attitude of, let's say, the formal discipline of BPM is the only way to do something, or the formal discipline of Six Sigma, and I see this a lot. We're going to come in and do Six Sigma because we feel it's better than BPM, or we feel it's better than Lean, or that's when you run into a lot of issues. So at the end of the day, my perspective is all of those philosophies are fantastic in their own way. And it's really about the problems that you're trying to solve and which philosophy makes most sense to use. And so rather than have this kind of war on improvement philosophies, come in with an open mind to say, hey, listen, it's all about improving our process no matter what, whether that we call it transformation, or whether we call it design thinking, or whether we call it Six Sigma. So be open-minded, because in reality, they all have a place at the table to help your business, right? And the more that you're closed-minded to it, you're going to try to force fit a particular philosophy in every circumstance, which is not a good situation to be in. So I don't know. I mean, I guess the only advice I can give is that just try to be open-minded, and things evolve. Like next year, there might be some other philosophy that we never even thought of. That's, wow, this is even more beneficial. And you don't want to have another culture war, or another philosophy war with, wait a second, we've been doing BPM for years. Now we're going to do this, So, and sorry, even funny thing is, like with Agile and all the other disciplines, like Kanban and stuff, like, these are all great philosophies and tools, but they're all from a lean concept that was from Toyota many years ago, right? And so it's pointless to have these debates over philosophy, right? It's just embrace them all and choose to use the right one in the right problem solving situation.
I was gonna say, yeah, I've always heard that. Oh, we use Agile here. Now we're gonna expand. It's got to be Agile, and they don't say, maybe something else might work better, but it's got to be Agile. So that's funny. Yeah. So any I was gonna say, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm not there every single day, but obviously you can reach out to me through LinkedIn. You'll just find me, Alexander Kurm. The other way, obviously, through my website, which is www.Kurm Consulting, so KURM consulting.com. Or just look up Kurm Consulting on LinkedIn and reach out. I'm always pretty active. If people reach out and have some questions, or want to reach out and just bounce some ideas around, I'm more than open to do it. So feel free to do it. And whether it's myself, someone on our team will reach out and get back to them for sure. So those would be the best ways to get a hold of me.
Great. Well, thanks. Fantastic, Alexander. I think it's been a very informative session, and certainly I've picked up a few things that I didn't know. And so thanks for coming on the show. It's been fantastic.
Hey, thanks for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Have yourself a great day.
You too. Thank you, Marcus. All the best.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye.
And now a word from our sponsors. The Lewis Institute provides an enterprise project management program that does more than just train PMs. It helps support them from the CEO level on down. These courses help certify project leaders and prepare them to pass the PMP exam. The Business Agility Institute provides Emergence, the Journal of Business Agility. This quarterly publication brings you inspiring stories from the most innovative companies. Use the promo code ANALYST to get a 10% discount on your annual subscription.